All right, today on the Buttoned Up podcast, we're joined by Mark Kohlenberg, founder of Moral Code, a footwear and leather accessories brand for guys. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So you're a longtime entrepreneur. You're kind of a veteran of the fashion industry, specifically a lot of experience with footwear. For those who don't know you, tell us where you grew up and how'd you end up slinging shoes?
Yeah, ironically, I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the fashion capital of the world. So I had a very lower middle class background growing up. My dad was a plumber, and I saw him. I would go with him at times on service calls, especially during the winter in Green Bay. At times it was pretty cold. Yeah. And I saw him slogging water heaters up and down the stairs in the middle of winter and, struggling with it. And, pretty early on, I convinced myself this just isn't something that I want to do. So even though when I grew up, the majority of my classmates never went to college in high school. So, in Green Bay, you could work at a paper mill, get a union job, and, get all the toys, snowmobile and cottage in a lake in northern Wisconsin and, enjoy a middle-class life. But I wanted to do something different, went to college, got a degree, and I've always been intrigued by business, but, kind of accidentally fell into the footwear side of it.
When you were younger or even in your college days, were you interested in menswear? Was it a personal passion? I
go back to that Green Bay upbringing where, a Packer sweatshirt is about the dressiest as people get. So honestly, no. In college, I got interested in clothing and looking good. I was always intrigued by brands. That's really what drew me to it. And then, ultimately, Edmonds is a local company. I was living in Milwaukee at the time. And John Kohlenberg was the owner. This was prior to any of the equity buyouts that started. And John really took that company extraordinarily from about $5 million in sales with a couple of partners. And a few years later, had it north of $100 million. So, wow. I literally did an informational interview with John Kohlenberg, and he looked at me and said, "Kid, I don't have anything for you here." But he had a dusty old cardboard box behind his desk, full of kid shoes. And he said, a friend of mine in Germany is really looking for somebody to launch this brand in the United States. I'd be happy to make an introduction for you. So long story short, they flew me out to Germany. I met with the management team, and we established a joint venture with Edmonds and the German parent company, and that was really my entree into the footwear business. So, wow. And it's been a really comfortable business to stay in. So, it's easy. You can kind of reinvent yourself every 6 months with a new season. If something doesn't work, you get another shot at it. So, it's been a comfortable place to stay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so, when is this? Is this right after college?
This is a couple of years after. So, when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, the job market was terrible. The only jobs really available at the time were retail. So the May Company, which was right after Macy's, really the second tier, executive training program, was recruiting at all the Big Ten schools. So they recruited me for their Kaufman's division. I spent a year out in Pittsburgh working for Kaufman's and learning the retail end of things, which, honestly set the stage for the rest of my career, because you really have to understand retail to get into the wholesale side and certainly the product development side.
Yeah. And so your foray into the footwear market was with kid shoes.
It was with kid shoes, but my office was in the middle of Edmonds. My product was a warehouse in the Edmonds warehouse. I reported to John Kohlenberg, the CEO of Edmonds. So, I've had this experience where even though I wasn't on a day-to-day basis, I wasn't working directly with men's footwear, everything around me, literally everything around me, all the people around me were in the men's business. And I even traveled and used some of the Edmonds reps at the time to sell my products. So, I absorbed a lot that way.
Got it. And so you were learning a lot about the leather then, because that seems to be a kind of a specialty of yours.
Yeah. One of my first days at Edmonds, they sent me down to the Horween Tannery in Chicago on a nice hot July day and spent a day in the middle of the tannery grading leather.
I had to take a couple of showers to get that
yeah,
spot.
It was kind of sink or swim, and it wasn't pleasant, but I got through it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so what happens after that?
I spent about 15 years with Edmonds and grew the business with them into a pretty substantial business. Nordstrom was our key account. And we really, blew out the product to all the Nordstrom stores in the country, really set the stage for a premium, European sourced brand. We started to really grow the business. I was butting my heads at the time, with a structure in Germany that said, basically this is a typical kind of a German way. This is our product, go sell it. And at the end of the day, we really realized, and also through our work with Nordstrom, that's very responsive to local needs and, just a local mix of product that, the consumer in the United States wanted something a little bit different. So we started developing our own product. I started sourcing it on my own initially in Mexico, and then supplementing that with a little bit of product out of Germany to kind of put the icing on the cake. And it worked. And we expanded, pretty substantially after that. A few years later, Clarks of England bought, my parent company in Germany. So, that kind of changed things overnight. And Clarks really was a terrific company. I learned a lot from them. At the time, they were producing the majority of men's and women's shoes for Clarks in Brazil. And they invited me to go down there and meet with some of their factories. And we quickly moved our production out of Mexico to Brazil, found a great factory for it there, and continued to grow the business. So at its peak, we were doing about $15 million in sales. And again, this is kids' shoes that cost about $50 a pair. So, there's a lot of product going out into the market, and literally overnight, the business in Europe was not healthy, and Clark's just decided to close it down. So I got a call one afternoon from my boss saying I was just fired. Keep your eyes open. And 2 or 3 days later, I got the same call. So I was, even though it was frustrating, our business was the most profitable of any export market in the world. And even Allen Edmonds at the time was interested in purchasing the business outright just due to its profitability. We were the largest export market outside of Germany. So I approached Clarks. I tried to buy the brand from them. They really wouldn't entertain the offer, knocked on the door multiple times over about 10 days, and it became apparent they weren't interested for whatever reason. So I called my attorney, and we put together a group of investors and started our own brand in the identical space. So, the market was very supportive of me. I had retailers and Nordstrom calling me and really asking me to fill the void since there was literally no warning. And this happened in August when autumn winter shipments, back to school shipments were just going out. Mm-hmm. So they really needed somebody to fill that niche. So I started a new brand. We called it UMI, U-M-I. Same sourcing. The factory in Brazil was very supportive of me and backed me. Without that help, literally nothing would have happened, just from a cash flow perspective. And we put together a group of investors to raise money and started this new brand and quickly grew that as well. And I stayed with that for 5 or 6 years. The investors were really on a 5-year cycle. They decided to sell it, and we sold it to the Waco Group, which is the Florsheim family business in Milwaukee, which was somewhat of a surprise simply because, once again, they were entirely in the men's footwear business for years with brands like Florsheim and Nunn-Bush and Stacy Adams. They added Boggs to that mix after they purchased Umi, and they brought me on to run Umi. And then we also started a new brand called Florsheim Kids, which are really takedowns of the men's Florsheim styles. Mm-hmm. So I stayed on with Waco for about 6 years. Got bored again, and decided to leave, and quickly connected with an owner of a factory in India that was a third-generation business, exclusively doing private label footwear for better-grade European brands like Echo and Mephisto, Donald Pliner, a British brand called Loke, which is kind of the Allen Edmonds of the UK, if you're familiar with them. Yeah. And after a few meetings, it became apparent they were looking to get a foothold in the United States, and we came together, and that's how this new business was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And what, I guess what year so WDM was 2017, right? Or Moral Code was launched 2017.
WDM is just our kind of corporate umbrella. It was launched January of 2017. Yeah. And,
okay.
And then Moral Code came along about 6 months later.
Okay, because at one point, I'm not sure where you were at this point, but at one point, there's a big transition happening, right, from wholesale to e-commerce?
Yeah, we always envisioned, the Indian parent company and our ownership, I think recognized at the time the danger of being in any private label production is, if the factory down the highway is offering a similar product for $1 less a pair, there's nothing to hold that relationship with, the sourcing manager or the owner of that company. So they recognized that they were somewhat vulnerable and really needed to kind of shore up their business. So they wanted something a little more tangible, something that they could control. So that was, really the motivation for us starting Moral Code as a direct-to-consumer brand, even though we still do private label in the United States as well.
Got it. Okay. So you're kind of doing both.
We do both. And honestly, with the tariff situation, that Trump kind of brought into play, 6-8 months ago, our private label businesses, the phone's been kind of ringing off the hook. Because we have such a competitive advantage being based in India, we're vertically integrated. So we do everything ourselves. We have our own tannery. We have our own outsole factory. We have our own leather accessory production. So, it's really kind of a one-stop shop, and the duties from India really have not been affected.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Made in China and the Made in India label? Because obviously there's my thoughts on it is that there's a little bit of a lag right now where Made in China or Made in India, people still the quality is better than people think it is.
Yeah.
And people still kind of value that Made in Italy or Made in the USA label when in fact a lot of brands can't get what they need in this country.
Yeah, there's an objective argument and there's a subjective argument, and particularly in the United States, oftentimes you see people, I would say 50 plus that still are on this Made in USA thing. I don't think they really understand what goes into it, and footwear is footwear is very putsy. Just a typical men's leather dress shoe, may have upwards of 50 or 75 different components different pieces and components that go into a single shoe. So, and oftentimes all those components come from, distinct separate factories, whether it's an eyelet or a shoelace or an outsole or, anything that goes into it. So it's not good enough just to have the production facility. You need an infrastructure of suppliers around you that are supplying you in real time with everything, all those ingredients that it takes to mix up the shoe and ultimately produce it. So China was very well suited for that. 30 years of building up that infrastructure. Everything is there. It's very, very efficient. India also has a long history in footwear. They don't have all the component suppliers close by. So even with us, we do source at times, some of our hardware pieces for our accessories out of China just because they're not available locally. But I think, to a degree, India and even other countries have gotten a bad rap just in terms of, that made-in label. And, the perception, especially in the D2C business, when I look at my competitive set, I always say it's somewhat of a formula. When I hear about a new direct-to-consumer men's brand, it's an investment banker that just couldn't find a pair of shoes that he liked in the United States.
Had to cut out the middleman.
Exactly. And he's on vacation too, and then fill in the blank. It's either Spain or it's Portugal or it's Italy. Right. And he found this wonderful factory and he's bringing it back, as you said, without the middleman. So, right. That story's kind of old and it just doesn't make a difference anymore. So many products are made worldwide and they're starting to make iPhones in India. So, depending on what you're looking for and depending on the price category that you're playing in, there are varying degrees of quality available anywhere. So, Prada was in our factory a week and a half ago when I was in India visiting. So, I can tell you that, even the couture brands, spend time in those factories and consider production. It just all depends on the commitment the factory's making to quality and materials.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you've been known to say is that the industry, the menswear industry, has changed more in the last 12 months than the last 10 years or 20 years even. Yeah. So how so?
There's two primary reasons. The first reason is the casualization of men's footwear. So, it's been going on for, I would say for 5 or 6 years. But once the investment banks announced, roughly a year ago that they were relaxing their dress codes, and I think Goldman Sachs announced it first, and 3 or 4 others within the next days, followed very quickly. I happened to be in the city when that announcement was made. I was meeting with the department store here, with a buyer that bought both footwear and accessories. And the look on her face when she heard this, it was like, oh my God, I have this huge amount of inventory. I have these receipts coming in for the next season, so what am I going to do? And I think, the industry had to respond almost overnight to that change. So we saw very quickly an influx of sneakers and just a very, very rapid move away from, traditional dress shoes and into more casual footwear. And at least for us, we were already making leather sneakers. We were already making chukka boots and more casual footwear. But for brands that really had their whole identity wrapped up in dress footwear, it's a problem. It's really a problem because I don't think the genie's going back in the bottle.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a trend that's here to stay, and I think all offices. I mean, the investment bank, that's kind of the classically formal office,
Right.
So everything else is just trickling down from that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like though with things getting more casual, like brands kind of have a couple of options because either you can add specifically casual shoes to your lineup, so you can add sneakers and offer those alongside of dress shoes. Or some brands, like Kohan, are trying to do sort of more hybrid options. So it's kind of a dress shoe, but it kind of has a sneaker sole, or maybe it's a more comfortable dress shoe. So what are your thoughts on which direction to go?
I would say all of the above. Comfort is a key factor, and especially when when your customer is under, I would say 35 years old. These are guys that grew up wearing sneakers. It was part of their uniform. They didn't wear leather shoes to school as a kid growing up. Right. It was 100% sneakers. So when you're asking somebody, as an example, that's graduating from college or law school or med school or whatever, to go from their entire life of wearing a comfort focused product to putting on a leather-soled Goodyear welted dress shoe, it's like putting their putting their foot in a wooden box. Yeah. They may do it once, but they're not going to go back there. So that customer, I think Kohan's being very responsive to that customer, with comfort and somewhat of a hybrid product that provides the comfort, almost provides that sneaker look, but the upper is more dress focused, so you can get by wearing it at work. The other thing I was going to mention, just in terms of rapid change has been, and this honestly has been the last 6-7 months, has just been the integration of sustainable materials, into footwear. And that's not just men's, it's women's, it's kids. And you see it in apparel. You really see it across the board in all products. So, we have been diligently, carefully watching that. We have a couple of different products with varying degrees of sustainable materials, in process right now. And we hope to introduce, kind of the first tier of that in mid-spring and then the second tier for autumn-winter 20. But it's also, in my opinion, it's a game changer. Now, I don't know necessarily if that's going to differentiate one brand from the other. But again, if you look at anybody under the age of 30, I do think, fast forward a year or two, it's going to be a box that has to be checked. It's just going to be an expectation of the consumer that the sourcing of that product is ethical. Interesting.
So you think that it's something that you sort of have to do as a brand right now. You have to consider it as a brand. I mean, of course, there are certain brands like your Everlane of the world. They're building their entire company around it, around that idea or that consumer. Yeah. But there's always going to be your guy who wants a just leather dress shoe, right? Who doesn't really care about the other stuff. Yeah, but I don't think leather is going away, and I think part of this honestly is rooted in Beyond Meat. There's this whole conversation going on right now about what we put in our bodies, and is meat healthy or not? So I don't think you can bury your head in the sand and
think in 10 years the perception of meat or the perception of leather or frankly, anything is going to be the same as it is today. On the other hand, I have a very strong opinion. We were in a marketing meeting yesterday and, somebody used the word vegan leather and, my blood pressure just shoots up and, I shouted out, that's not leather at all. It's plastic. It's going to be in a landfill 1,000 years from now. So, it's somewhat of the Wild West when you talk about sustainable materials because there's no standards. There's no rules. Everybody has a different vision of it than the next person down the block. And at the end of the day, I think everyone's intentions are good, but this whole movement, I'm on my soapbox here, but this whole movement towards vegan leather, it's plastic. So, I think the consumer at times thinks they're doing something good, but you'd be better off buying a leather shoe. At least over time, it's going to regenerate into the earth. The plastic isn't going to do that.
Yeah, it's a bit of an oxymoron, the term vegan leather. It's kind of like saying vegan chicken. It doesn't exist, right?
Precisely. Yeah.
And then the other terms around it, like recyclable, I think, like you're saying, there's so much confusion around what it actually means because there's no universal definition.
There isn't.
So brands are kind of throwing it around right now.
Absolutely. I think Everlane's really done a terrific job. They take it very seriously. They're very careful. But other brands, all it is a marketing term. Yeah.
Cool. So for you guys, if you are checking that box, like, what percentage of your products, I guess, would be, is it kind of like that's a specific line that's focused on more sustainable materials, or you're kind of weaving that throughout the brand?
We're weaving it. It's not particularly easy, especially doing it, fairly rapidly. We have advantages because we have our own tannery. So everything is under our roof. We do everything ourselves. So we're not contracting that out to somebody else. But, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there's substance behind it. We want to make sure that we have all the certifications and accreditations and endorsements. We want to do it the right way. And if it takes a little bit longer to do that, that's fine. And I'll give a nod to a competitor, Ryan at Greats. I saw he posted yesterday that, although Greats isn't sustainable, you have to look at it from a different perspective as well. When you buy a quality product, you get longevity out of it. So, regardless of something sustainable, if it's either wearing out or falling apart or becoming unfashionable and you're tossing it in a landfill after a few weeks or a few months, you're better off buying a longer wearing product that is not often, as often replaced, that there's some longevity to it. So it's a good perspective to have in this whole sustainable argument.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, that's why if you do buy something that's not only high quality, but also somewhat timeless design, which obviously there's no real timeless products, but if you can wear a shoe for 5 years, get it resold and get another 5 years out of it, that's a sustainable behavior. Right. Versus buying something new from H&M every year.
Yeah. And we kind of had an epiphany, in this marketing meeting that I just mentioned, but, the whole concept of Goodyear Welted footwear, most people, they may have heard the term. They really don't understand what it is, but, it enables you to either the origin of the footwear, the factory that made it, or a cobbler to literally take the outsole off and replace it. You can wear that shoe till you're 100 years old. So, even though it's made of leather and it's a dress shoe, at times it can be a casual boot, but it's something that, it has a life of 100 plus years, really, if you wanted to, versus the majority of footwear in the country, which is cemented construction, which is impossible to redo. So it does end up in a landfill.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Goodyear Welt because I want to ask you about some of these terms that are, in footwear that, I think are kind of confusing and maybe there's, you could offer some clarity as someone who's been in the business for a while. So Goodyear Welt is one of them and different types of construction because there's a lot of, especially in the like men's fashion internet culture, like on Reddit, and there's a lot of people who simply won't buy anything that's not Goodyear Welt. Yeah. And the vast majority of men will never go to a cobbler. They'll never get a pair of shoes.
If you can find a cobbler.
If you can find one, And even if you have one down the street, most guys just aren't wearing their Goodyear Welt shoes that much. You have your pockets, your boot enthusiasts who are, really wearing their stuff for decades. But people really, really want Goodyear welted shoes.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Is it worth it, or are these other, Blake Rapid, like are these other construction methods, if you can save maybe a little bit of money and a little bit of weight off your shoe, are they just as good?
Yeah, Goodyear Welt is the pinnacle. Really, there's nothing that even comes close. So, and the concept, it's not advantageous only for wearability. It's also comfort. It's flexibility. It's checking a number of different boxes. So, I think the industry as a whole has done a really poor job of educating the consumer to the advantages of Goodyear welting. Now, most people think of it just in terms of a dress shoe with a leather bottom. I'd never wear that, or something my grandfather wore. So we're actually launching a new direct to consumer brand this summer. And it's called Milwaukee Boot Company. And we're making almost, I think 90% of the collection is Goodyear welted boots, but these are gritty Milwaukee boots. Milwaukee has a great history. If you go back 100 years of really being one of the shoemaking capitals of the United States, there's tanneries, there are shoe factories. A lot of these buildings are still standing. So we're kind of taking that authenticity and grittiness, into the product. But these boots, it would be in the same genre as a Red Wing or a Thorogood or something along those lines. But, most people wouldn't think those are Goodyear welted product. They are. So, they have all the advantages, but they don't have a look and a feel of an Allen Edmonds as an example that's, a traditional dress shoe with a leather outsole and a Goodyear welt.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a believer in the Goodyear welt for sure, especially on boots or anything. If you're going to wear it in a city that gets some rain and some snow,
right.
I mean, you can really wear that type of shoe in the snow, and it's not great for the leather, but your feet will stay dry.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in terms of the other types of constructions, and I think that's also one thing that really differentiates a true shoemaker from a contracted factory. So, the rest of the shoes, the majority of the rest of the shoes made in the country, made for sale in the United States are cemented footwear. As far as sneakers, a lot of them are vulcanized footwear, which is basically popping an upper and an outsole in a giant oven and baking them, and the outsole adheres to the upper through that vulcanization process. But everything else is cemented. And there's certainly nothing wrong with cemented shoes. We make a lot of them, but, again, in terms of a minor bump up in price, you're really getting an investment for life in a Goodyear welted product. And in my opinion, also comfort. So, I think that's part of the deal as well.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. Another term that gets thrown around a lot is handcrafted, or made by hand. You're reading my mind.
So, referencing this marketing meeting again yesterday, somebody brought that up as well. And I just said, I've heard it 1,000 times. It's meaningless after a while. The one thing I can tell you, 100% of the shoes that anybody buys at any price point, I don't care if you're going to the dollar store or Walmart, they're all made by hand. Okay. Right. So shoes are, as I said before, it's a very putsy process. It's a very time consuming process. There's very little automation in shoemaking. So I don't care if you're an Allen Edmonds or, you're selling a $9.99 shoe, at a dollar store, they're all made by hand. So using the term handcrafted again, in my opinion, is almost meaningless because everything is handcrafted.
Right, so even those cemented shoes that you get at Walmart are made by hand, technically, right?
Yeah, they're plastic uppers, but they're still made by hand. So, in general terms, you get what you pay for. So, it doesn't take that much of a discerning eye to tell the difference between a cheap product and something that's well constructed and, is using top-notch materials and has a point of difference. I think, footwear, particularly for men, that, I think really lag behind women in terms of fashion awareness and self-expression. Footwear is one of those areas that's a little bit easier than clothing because number one, it's an accessory. And number two, particularly if there's either a written or unwritten dress code at work, footwear is one area it's kind of a gray area. So you can kind of play around with it a little bit and just use it to, kind of, self-express, as I said. So, it's easier for men.
Yeah. Now, as someone who's been in the industry since pre-e-commerce, pre-direct-to-consumer days.
Prehistoric, yeah, I understand.
I didn't say that for the record. But how are you getting the word out now? Because you are an internet direct-to-consumer company. So what are you doing to make people aware of Moral Code?
A number of different things. We're a fairly regular advertiser in Esquire, both online and digital. We've done some stuff with GQ as well. Trying to really capture the fashion end of the market. And as you said, there's a pretty tight group of guys out there online that, I swear some of them know more about footwear than me, and, they haven't really even been in the business. So, you really want to get their attention and, get their approval, to a degree. And then we're active on any number of the bulletin boards or blogs that are going out there, email blasts. So, we've done a lot with Gear Patrol, with Uncrate, Valet. So, it's pretty targeted stuff. And then we just use paid search as well, to really kind of capture the specific niches where, we can kind of own that product category.
Got it. Yeah. And when you're working with these digital media publishers, are you really just doing brand building, or are you looking at every dollar spent and seeing what comes back from a specific campaign?
A little bit of each. I think, the whole D2C world still is, untamed. So, it seems like every week there's a new brand that's, introducing themselves and trying to take some share from the guys that have already been there. Yeah. But, you need brand awareness. Brand awareness is not something you invest in once and it magically goes away. You have to keep on maintaining that brand awareness out there, or that new customer that may not have been in the market, a week ago or yesterday, suddenly he is today. Mm-hmm. Really, how are you going to make them aware of your brand? So, one thing we're quite careful of is the whole influencer business, the celebrity end of things. That I think has gotten a bit out of hand, and, there's a whole market of people that just want a lot of free products. So we're pretty discerning when it comes to, who gets the product and really, what they can do, with that product, a win for them and a win for us.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've had some experience with that on the other end. Yeah. And, I feel like with influencer marketing, it's hard to scale a little bit. Mm-hmm. And because it kind of is like smaller influencers, and there's all these terms now, micro influencers.
Right.
But they're very effective. They have a lot of engagement, but they're also smaller. So to really do a campaign properly, you'd need hundreds, and
I think the key thing is conversion. At the end of the day, regardless of the amount of eyeballs on it, are people actually engaging with the product, and most importantly, are they purchasing the product? So the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, especially men too, because I feel like guys in general aren't really shopping Instagram as much right now. Shopping online for sure.
Right.
And even shopping online, I mean, shoes are a little bit easier, but you still have the sizing issue to deal with.
You do.
So you want people to hopefully get their size right with that first order, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think without the, free shipping and free returns, the D2C business in footwear wouldn't be around, because again, there's no standardization between brands. It's like buying a pair of jeans. One brand's going to fit you different than the other brand. So you need to have that flexibility. And we do see in footwear a higher return rate than I think you would see in other categories of D2C shopping.
Are you doing anything to try to get that return rate down?
Always. It's an expensive proposition. Men's shoes are big and heavy and clunky, and, it's expensive to just mindlessly, ship shoes around the country, for nothing. So, I think reviews are helpful, where you have real consumers commenting on the fit characteristics of a product and whether to go up a half size or down a half size. And ultimately, the more content that we, as a brand and producer of those shoes put in the content online in terms of, the last that we're using, the outsole we're using, and generally just those fit characteristics, the more complete we can tell that story, that return rate should go down.
Yeah, it's like I feel like a lot of brands don't put enough on the product page, the actual product page, and even if it's just text description,
right?
Or like you said, reviewers can kind of talk about their experience with the sizing versus other brands. It's so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really kind of where Amazon kills it, just from the review standpoint, because for most products on Amazon you can really find a robust amount of reviews to help you with the sizing or characteristics of the product.
Now, can people find any Moral Code products on Amazon?
They can, yeah. We've had mixed results on Amazon. We initially started with both the footwear and the accessories. We found that honestly the traction for the footwear was much stronger, so that's really the focus moving forward. But we do have a sizable Amazon business, and at the end of the day, a couple 100 million customers with Prime, you can't ignore that. So, you have to have the product available to them. But it's all regular price. We're running the business ourselves, and I don't think it's diluting the brand.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the brand, like how do you want people to feel about Moral Code versus Allen Edmonds? Like who is the Moral Code guy?
That's the big question, and that was really the root of this marketing meeting that we were in yesterday. So, Moral Code has been, it's still a baby. It's only been around for 2 years, but with the massive change in the dress shoe business, and that's really how we came to market as an alternative to Allen Edmonds. All the same quality, all the same fit, all the same materials, for roughly half the price. But that market is really turned upside down. So we're trying to figure out a way, even though we're just 2 years old, to, really pivot the brand to be responsive to the market today and include sustainability. I think that's going to be a big part of it. We want to lean into our name, which we've never done before. When I'm, flying around all the time, which I seem to do every week, the first question people ask me on a plane is, what does that mean? What does Moral Code mean? Why did you choose that name? And I've really never had a good response for them because up until this point, it has only been a name of a brand, but it means something. And again, with, this kind of polarized political environment that we're in as a country right now, we want to lean into that name. We want that name to stand for something. And even if it pisses some people off, that's okay. But I think companies and brands and corporations need to take a higher level of interest in what's going on in the country, taking positions, saying what's right and saying what's wrong, at least from their perspective. So, in the months to come, I think you'll see Moral Code a little more active in the political discussion area, also on issues of sustainability. We're produced in India. And just as an example, we're one of the few footwear factories that really, I think, does an extraordinary job with workers' rights and worker safety and, frankly, providing an environment that the shoes are made that anyone would be comfortable in. And I've had at times the unpleasant experience. I've been in hundreds and hundreds of shoe factories in my life all over, China and Vietnam and Indonesia and, Brazil, God knows where else, Mexico, and India. And I really would put our factory, in the top one or two. So, we're doing a great job at it. And I think part of it is we produce for a lot of European brands who have very, very strict standards in terms of, humane treatment of their employees, humane treatment of the animals, all environmental regulations. So, once again, we're checking all those boxes. We have all those certifications, but, we need to tell that story better because frankly, we're not telling it at all right now. So that'll be part of it moving forward too.
I think that's a good idea because even brands that aren't like Everlane, for example, specifically focused on that part of their story, all brands seem to want to brag about their factory and their conditions if they can. And that's why you see these days on an about page, you might see pictures of the factory. Mm-hmm. On product page, you might even see listings about where the components of a product came from.
Exactly.
Which you never used to see.
Right.
Like zipper brands are kind of common knowledge now, which is pretty wild.
YKK has a brand everywhere, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Riri, there are zipper snobs on the internet now. That didn't exist a few years ago.
It's a little frightening, actually.
Yeah. Speaking of snobs, we have to talk sneakers real quick because we were talking about this out in the waiting room. You have this like crazy trend going on with leather sneakers, minimal leather sneakers.
Right.
And there's always been a group that loved this style of shoe, specifically the Common Projects, the Achilles Low. Yeah. And now you can get that kind of silhouette and aesthetic at any price point.
Correct.
So you have your sub 50s from, H&M, then you have like your New Republics, obviously Adidas, Stan Smith and those. Yeah. And then I think it gets really interesting in the, 100 to 250 range. Beckett Siminen, you guys, a lot of other brands. And then you have your designer stuff, your Gucci's and your Common Projects. Do you think where is that point of diminishing returns?
God, no. It's tough to say. There are so many people in that category right now. Just because I think, on the one hand, it's by far the easiest product category to merge into to kind of address that casualization of men's footwear. Mm-hmm. So whether you like it or not, everybody's got a sneaker in their closet from somebody. So, in terms of transitioning product from a dress focused, piece of footwear into something more casual, a leather sneaker is like the path of least resistance. Yeah. So, and as you said, there's such a wide range of price points out there. But, in my opinion, at the end of the day, the products are all pretty similar. The differences you're going to see is really the quality of materials that they're using and the workmanship that goes into it. So, we play heavily into that category. Sneakers are probably the fastest growing piece of our business. But, you have to kind of chart your own path because you just don't want to copy everybody else that's been out there. So, as I mentioned to you, I went to the opening of the Nordstrom men's store in Manhattan a little over a year ago, and it seemed like there are probably 50 different choices of white leather dress sneakers, all next to each other on display, from common projects all the way down to probably something, under $100 retail. But, unless the consumer is specifically shopping by brand and knows what they want, I don't think the minor differences in product are really going to be a game changer for anybody. Moving forward, I do think materials are going to have a point of difference, and that's really providing something, for the consumer that they can, identify something, that is a material difference in the product. So whether it's more sustainable leather or, footbed or linings or something along those lines, that's the direction it has to go.
Got it. But the sneaker trend is something that Moral Code is leaning into. Yeah,
we are. And our hope is, honestly, to establish a unisex sneaker. We found the data that we have is already more than 30% of the consumers buying product online from Moral Code are women. So either buying for a boyfriend or a significant other or a husband. So, sneakers, are also, perfect category to really try to offer something to a woman shopper, simply because the product is fairly universal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You have a lot of really popular casual shoes like Vans canvas sneakers, and even like J. Crew has a Chukka boot called the McAllister that's offered in a kind of unisex sizing scale, which I think is really helpful. Also for people who need like smaller or larger sizes.
Absolutely.
For their gender,
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we do a series of rapid fire questions here.
Okay.
That you can't prepare for, but if you're down, we'll jump into those.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right, cool. Oxfords or brogues?
I like brogues.
Brogues, okay.
Yeah.
Loafers or sneakers?
Sneakers.
Nice. Spring, summer, or fall, winter?
Fall, winter, every day.
Wow, yeah. and that's a Wisconsin answer.
Well, I think it's the market overall because, the spring summer business, with traditional footwear brands, it's pretty light. The majority of sales are done in autumn winter season. Generally, it's a higher value season. People are willing to spend more money, and there's longevity. Those sales start in July and they really run through the holidays. So, I'm all in on autumn winter.
Totally, yeah. Well, plus you can wear boots in the summer, but you can't really wear boat shoes in the winter.
Absolutely, or sandals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Jeans, chinos, or trousers?
Jeans.
Okay. Favorite Bond actor, if you have one?
Daniel Craig.
Nice. Notch lapels or peak lapels?
Neither. I don't know.
Well, you're wearing notch today, so we'll go with that. Navy or charcoal, if you got to pick one suit?
Charcoal.
Charcoal. Okay. And then if you got a big day, what song are you listening to in the shower to get pumped up?
Oh man, that's a tough one. This morning I was up at 4 a.m., so believe me, it was no song at all.
Just coffee.
Yeah, literally. I'm running a blank there.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this has been great. What are you really excited about for the next, 6 to 12 months with Moral Code?
Yeah, we got so many things, upcoming now. So, number one, sustainable materials. Number two, more sneakers and casual shoes. We're really juiced about Milwaukee Boot Company. We just opened a retail store in Milwaukee, under that brand name. And it's going to be a gritty, authentic brand. So, I'm just in the midst of working on the product development for the final product that will be released, on a direct-to-consumer website. I'm thinking probably in late May. And, the cool thing about the shoe business is every 6 months, again, you got a new shot at it. It's a new at bat. So, we're constantly kind of juggling 3 seasons at the same time. And, I'm already working on spring, summer 21. So, we got a lot of irons in the fire, but a lot of cool stuff coming up.
Nice. And what will those boots start at, just out of curiosity?
Nothing is finalized, but I would think, probably opening price point would be about 140. Nothing over $200.
Wow. And those will be Goodyear Welt.
The majority of them, I'd say 90%. I think we're doing 2 styles that are not Goodyear welted, but the vast majority are Goodyear welt. It's a pretty tight collection, but we want to start small, and then we'll have 2 accessories, a messenger bag, and a backpack as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And if people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
LinkedIn. Use it heavily. So LinkedIn or moralcode.com or WDM.com or now MilwaukeeBoot.com as well.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's great being here.